Coming up, the number one seed in the East is becoming clear, and the play-in game positioning is changing by the day. This is Locked On Game to Game, NBA.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You're listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA. Local experts going over the biggest stories on the hardwood and recapping all of the action for you from last night in the NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. A force known as Joel Embiid took down the Celtics pretty much all by himself last night. Locked On Celtics, though, very optimistic after the loss.
The Celtics almost pulled off the miracle in Philadelphia, but Joel Embiid was a little too much. I'm John Corrales of the Locked On Celtics podcast, and Joel Embiid's 52 points on 20 of 25 shooting was the obvious difference in this game. But I don't think the Celtics really come out of this feeling defeated at all. I don't think anybody on the Celtics side of things, any Celtics fans, come out of this feeling that Philly has figured anything out. The Celtics only lost by 2, and Philly tried everything they could to lose that game there at the end. Celtics were down 6, and they had a shot with a chance to tie, but Jason Tatum missed a real tough one. Celtics didn't have Jaylen Brown. They didn't have Robert Williams, and they still led at one point in the fourth quarter. You can point to a couple of things here. Missed free throws for the Celtics, where they missed 6 in this game. That's a way they could have won this. If Joel Embiid has any sort of normal night, if they close out on PJ Tucker, there are little places along the way where the Celtics could have won this game. They didn't, but I don't think it really matters all that much. All it is one more day to wait for the Celtics to clinch that second seed. First seed is probably out of reach at this point. Celtics can do this with one win, just one more win along the way. They play Toronto twice and Atlanta, so I think they're going to get it.
Milwaukee is steadily inching closer to locking up the top seed in the East, with the Celtics loss and the Bucks win over the Wizards last night on Tuesday being one step closer. Locked On Bucks and Locked On Wizards are in with your recap.
Taking care of business has been the name of the game for the Milwaukee Bucks down the stretch run of the regular season, and they did just that tonight against the Washington Wizards with a 140-128 win. My name's Kane Pittman. I'm the host of the Locked On Bucks podcast on a night where the Wizards had basically none of their starters available, most of their key players out of the lineup. The Bucks stars took care of business. Giannis had a triple-double. Drew Holiday and Bobby Portis stuffed the stat sheet. And Jay Crowder had his first offensive outburst for the Milwaukee Bucks. He had 19 points, 4 of 5 shooting from 3. Overall, the Bucks were outstanding from three-point territory, 23 makes on 54% shooting, if you don't mind. And overall, it was a good night because the Philadelphia 76ers beat Boston. The Bucks' magic number for the number 1 seed is now 1 with a game against Chicago tomorrow. The only concern, Pat Connaughton left early with an ankle sprain. That follows Grayson Allen having an ankle sprain 2 nights ago against Philadelphia. So those 2 players will be a watch. We're going to break it all down on Locked On Bucks, wherever you get your podcasts.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy Brandon Scott again from Locked On Wizards. The Washington Wizards fall at home to the Milwaukee Bucks, 140-128 tonight. But what led to this defeat? Well, number one, the Washington Wizards are officially in tank mode. With them being out of contention for the playoffs / the play-in tournament, they now have access to their 2023 first-round pick. So with that, tonight they sat down Bradley Beal, Kyle Kuzma, Kristaps Porzingis, Denny Avdia, DeLon Wright, that is, and Monte Morris. So they said it's injuries / illnesses, but really they're trying to tank. So really, this is a big reason why we lost tonight, giving the young guys a lot of minutes, such as Johnny Davis, who scored 20 points, and Kendrick Nunn, who was acquired with the Rui Hachimura trade that sent Rui to the Lakers. He contributed 24 points, shooting 9 for 17 from the field tonight. So again, the Wizards are officially in tank mode, and they're getting ready for the draft lottery. So I appreciate everybody, and have a good night.
The Warriors are helping their own cause with a win, and now they get to control their destiny if they want to avoid the play-in game in the West. Locked On Warriors with all the details of the win over the Thunder.
It was a wild and thrilling home finale for the Golden State Warriors. They emerged victorious, and it helps tremendously in terms of playoff positioning. I'm Cyrus Sauces with your Locked On Warriors, Locked On Now recap of the defending world champions, hanging on for a 136-125 victory at home over the Oklahoma City Thunder in a night where Klay Thompson was a late scratch because of lower back soreness. Stephen Curry and Jordan Poole stepped up and delivered. 34 points for Stephen Curry, 30 for the Poole party, but perhaps the player that stuck out the most was Moses Moody, who was given 25 minutes of play tonight and delivered, scoring 13 points on 5 of 7 shooting, 3 of 5 from beyond the arc, terrific rebounding, great defense, and the Golden State Warriors are now the 5 seed in the Western Conference after tonight. Following tomorrow night's Lakers-Clippers game, the Warriors will be the 6th seed, but they do control their destiny in terms of avoiding the play-in tournament.
It was iffy for a while there, but the Grizzlies ended up victorious in their final regular season game in Memphis last night. Locked On Grizzlies with a post-game breakdown.
Admit it, you were nervous there for a minute. Don't lie to me. I know that you were scared. The Grizzlies are going to lose to the Blazers. Oh, it's going to happen. Just take a deep breath. Everything's fine. A double-digit victory for the Memphis Grizzlies in their home regular season finale, just as we all predicted. I'm Joe Mullinax of Locked On Grizzlies, and of course it wasn't actually that simple, right? The Portland Trail Blazers were a very tough group, despite not having Damian Lillard, Jeremy Grant, Anthony Simons, all those guys were out. It was a G League crew for the most part for Portland, and they showed some real flashes of competitiveness. The Grizzlies were clearly the better team physically, but they were not always there mentally. However, Luke Kennard was red hot from 3 once again. John Morant had flashes of the John Morant that we all know and love. Desmond Bane saved the day late. They pulled it out, even though it wasn't the prettiest victory of the season for the Grizzlies.
Cleveland has finally clinched home court to begin the playoffs, at least, for a win over Orlando last night. Locked On teams from both sides go over the final.
Hey guys, how's it going? Evan Damaro here, co-host of Locked On Cavs, and the Locked On Now takeaway after the Cleveland Cavaliers' Tuesday night win over the Orlando Magic. Well, it took a little bit, but the Cavs finally did it. They clinched home court in the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs, where they will likely face the New York Knicks. This is a pretty big swing for Cleveland, as they were looking a little rocky towards the end of the season. And now that they have clinched this, there's a little bit less pressure now, shifting focus to the postseason as Donovan Mitchell takes on his hometown childhood team in the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs with his new squad. And it's going to be an exciting time for sure. This win against Orlando was big no matter what, but the fact that the Cavs were able to hit 50 in and of itself is big too, and it's all about the playoffs going forward. Hear about this and more on Locked On Cavs. You can find it anywhere you can get your podcasts, and you can watch us at any time on YouTube.
This is Philip Rosenreich, the host of Locked On Magic, and it has finally happened. The playoff field in the Eastern Conference is fully set, and the Orlando Magic are staying home, lasting until Game 79, falling to the Cleveland Cavaliers 117-113, and being officially eliminated from the postseason. This game was very much a lesson, or very much a statement of who the Magic are. They do not quit. They are a difficult team to handle. They're a team that is going to rise to the challenge. But this is clearly not their time. This is clearly not their moment, and this is clearly yet one more lesson for a young team to take. Donovan Mitchell's playing some fantastic basketball, made the killer shots down the stretch that ended this season and ended any hopes for the Magic to play beyond their scheduled 82 games. This Magic team has a lot to be proud of and a lot to still play for in these final 3 games. A heck of a season for the Orlando Magic, but unfortunately, they're going home just a bit early.
The second team came through for Toronto last night as the Raptors go above 500. They improve their play-in positioning as well. Locked On Raptors goes over what went down against the Hornets.
Getting by with a little help from the bench. Sean Woodley here from Locked On Raptors to break down the Toronto Raptors' 120-100 win over the Charlotte Hornets on Tuesday night to move to 40-39 in the season, above 500 for the first time in really who the hell knows how long. The big takeaway here is that the Raptors got themselves some help from their bench, and it shows just how a little bit of bench help can help this team go a long way. It's been a season-long struggle for them getting scoring from their reserves. In this game, they get 20 points from Will Barton off the bench, 6 of 9 from 3. In his previous 12 games as a Raptor, he had hit 5 of his 25 threes, so the floodgates burst open tonight for Barton. The nice buyout pickup who hopefully can offer some bench scoring going forward here for the Raptors, especially as they wait for Gary Trent Jr. to get back from injury. Chris Boucher also had himself 21 points on 6 of 8 shooting as well. Precious Achiuwa had 12 points in some really strong defensive moments. This was a win for the Raptors that was pretty easy, pretty low-key, but the bench was why that was. The starters did not have their best night. They had some off moments, but the bench kept this team with distance between them and the Hornets for most of this game. I'll have more broken down on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Raptors. Be sure to tune in.
The Heat are looking like they're playoff bound at this point, but they're just on the wrong side of that play-in game line at this point. Locked On Heat goes over last night's win over the Pistons and looks ahead to the last few regular season games.
Jimmy Butler scored 18 points in the fourth quarter, helping Miami pull away from the Detroit Pistons for a 118-105 Heat win. I'm David Ramil, the host of Locked On Heat. Miami had built a 17-point lead early in the game. Not much of a surprise versus a Pistons team missing numerous players to injury and having lost 20 of their last 21 games. But Miami, true to form all season, allowed the Pistons to work their way back and were actually down 2 midway through the fourth quarter. But that's when Butler entered the game, and Jimmy, who had been somewhat passive all game, perhaps purposefully slow, looking to make plays for others and taking just a handful of shots for the first 3 quarters. Then he took over, finishing with 25 points to go along with 8 assists, 8 rebounds to help seal the victory. That Jimmy could do this, especially against the Pistons, is no surprise. But if he was hoping that he could pull off the win without him, if he was trying to send a message, it fell on deaf ears, and Butler had to be ridiculously good just to carry the team to another win that was much more difficult than it should have been. Miami improves to 42-37 on the season, but is looking to make up any ground in standings as they record this. It seems that they'll likely remain in the 7th seed and in the play-in tournament with just 3 games left in the regular season. For a full recap of tonight's game, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Heat.
Coming up, the Timberwolves and Hawks get much-needed wins. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA. Today's edition of Locked On Game to Game is brought to you by Ultimate Pro Basketball GM. If you've ever dreamed about working in an NBA front office, being a GM, your dream can come true with this game. You manage every strategic aspect of your team. You hire the coaches and assistants. You trade and train the players. You make draft picks, and you navigate free agency as well. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Pro Basketball GM is completely free, playable offline, play on the go as you want and when you want to. Locked On NBA listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when they use the promo code Locked On in the game store, so make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit probasketballgm.com, scan the code, or look it up on the app stores. That's probasketballgm.com. Ultimate Basketball GM. Start your dynasty today. Welcome back to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you again for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. 2 teams up against it in terms of playoff positioning in the Timberwolves and the Nets faced off yesterday. Minnesota rising to the occasion while Brooklyn is teetering closer to that play-in game in the East. Locked On Timberwolves and Locked On Nets go over the game and the playoff picture.
The Minnesota Timberwolves desperately needed a win to stop a 3-game skid and stay afloat with hopes of getting out of the bottom playing game in the Western Conference, and they got exactly that against the Brooklyn Nets on Tuesday night. I'm Ben Beacon, host of the Locked On Wolves podcast. The Timberwolves were down 3 at halftime, a sloppy first half, tons of transition defensive issues, a recurring theme all season, a big issue that sunk them Sunday against a lowly Portland team. That was a problem here again in this one. But as the game wore on, the Timberwolves took advantage of a small Brooklyn Nets lineup with Royce O'Neal at center in the closing moments. Karl-Anthony Towns hit a couple of big buckets, the go-ahead free throws, and then Spencer Dinwiddie, the Timberwolves finally stopped him. They avoided switching in the last couple of possessions. Anthony Edwards smothered a Spencer Dinwiddie 3-point attempt that would have given the Nets the lead. And then on the final shot of the game, the Wolves successfully contested Dinwiddie. The shot clanged off the rim, and the Wolves hung on to win. It was a hard-fought game. We'll break it down on Locked On Wolves. Subscribe to Locked On Timberwolves for all things Wolves.
Doug Norrie, Locked On Nets coming at you following a misfire by Brooklyn against Minnesota in a game where the Nets had a chance to bring their magic number for the playoffs to 1. Even though the Miami Heat had won the game, the Nets were able to hang tight. but ultimately down the stretch were not able to get the job done. Had 2 shots to send the game to overtime from Spencer Dinwiddie. Looked like he might have been fouled on one. The second one just couldn't go down. Nets still hold their fate in their own hands with 3 games remaining on the schedule. Have to win 2 of the next 3 to close this thing out and retain the 6th seed. They have a pretty soft landing where that is concerned. We'll be talking about the game, what lies ahead for the Nets, and what to expect for this last little stretch of games of the regular season over at Locked On Nets.
Atlanta playing like a team right now that does not want their season to end just yet. They took down the Bulls yesterday. Locked On Hawks goes over the huge implications of this win.
Hello, friends. My name is Brad Rowland, and Atlanta Hawks go on the road to Chicago and win by a final score of 123-105 on this Tuesday evening. Arguably the biggest result of the season for the Hawks when you factor in everything with regard to the play-in race and the tiebreakers and all of that, and going on the road without Trae Young and DeAndre Hunter in this game. And the Hawks were pretty impressive. They led really wire to wire in this one. There were a few moments in the third quarter that were not fantastic for Atlanta, but generally speaking, the starters were awesome. Bench was solid. And the Hawks really out-physicaled the Bulls in this game. They shot the ball well from the perimeter, but also really on the interior. 70 points in the paint for Atlanta in this one. And they overcame a lot of turnover issues in the second half. And generally speaking, like Donovan was very solid. Jalen Johnson was very good off the bench. Sadiq Bey was very good for the Hawks. DeJounte Murray had a nice steady hand at the point of attack for Atlanta, and a very, very quality team win for the Hawks on the road. And with a win, potentially on Wednesday, the Hawks might have the chance to stop their long suffering with regard to hanging around the 500 mark and being within 1 game 500 for the last 2+ months. We'll have more on this game and much more on the Hawks context and all of that fun stuff on Locked On Hawks podcast.
New Orleans is in the play-in game mix, but they continue to struggle without their star big man. Locked On Pelicans goes over the issues of playing without Zion.
In the loss to the Sacramento Kings, the New Orleans Pelicans showed you why they still need Zion Williamson. I'm Jake Madison, host of Locked On Pelicans. Brandon Ingram got off to a blistering start, scoring 14 points in the first quarter, but the Kings quickly adjusted and took him out for the rest of the game. B.I. scored just 8 points over the final 3 quarters as the Pelicans offense kind of fell apart. It shows you just how reliant they are on Brandon Ingram, and it's great when he plays like a superstar, but if he struggles, this team will lose games. To do anything in the postseason, they're going to need Zion Williamson. While he's close to a return, the team would like him to go through a practice before stepping out there on the court. They have 1 practice left on Saturday before their final game on Sunday. They'll likely get him back for a first-round playoff series, but they need to make it there first. And with 3 games to go, the Pelicans need to keep their offense going. Otherwise, it won't even matter. It's time to make some adjustments.
A young Utah squad pushed the Lakers to overtime before coming up just short in the end. Locked On Jazz pleased with the effort despite the loss.
The Utah Jazz started a lineup that included Luka Samanic, who's on a 10-day contract, and Udoka Azubuike for his 7th start of his NBA career against Anthony Davis and LeBron James. And somehow, some way, the Utah Jazz got this game to overtime before falling 135-133. David Locke of Locked On Jazz. The Jazz trailed this game by as many as 14. They trailed by 11 going into the second half. They cut it to 4. And then Damian Jones hit 2 free throws late and a Kelly Olynyk banker 3 as Olynyk had 23.7 rebounds and 7 assists to lead the Jazz in this one. LeBron James and Austin Reeves combined for the final 19 points of the game. Anthony Davis did not score in the final stretch or in the overtime for the Lakers. Damian Jones doing a lot of the defensive work there for the Jazz as well as a collective effort. An impressive effort by the Jazz against a Laker team that needed the win, but maybe enough to knock the Jazz out of the play-in with this loss.
That's a wrap for this edition of Locked On Game to Game NBA. Make sure that you are subscribed to Locked On NBA and your favorite team's Locked On podcast, especially now with the playoffs coming up, both on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.